Welcome to another episode of Follow the Brand. I am your host, Grant McGaugh, CEO of 5-Star BDM, a 5-star personal branding and business development company. I want to take you on a journey that takes another deep dive into the world of personal branding and business development using compelling personal story, business conversations, and tips to improve your personal brand. By listening to the Follow the Brand podcast series, you will be able to differentiate yourself from the competition and allow you to build trust with prospective clients and employers. You never get a second chance to make a first impression. Make it one that will set you apart, build trust, and reflect who you are. Developing your 5-star personal brand is a great way to demonstrate your skills and knowledge. If you have any questions for me or my guests, please email me at grant.mcgaugh, spelled McGaugh, at 5-star BDM, B for brand, D for development, M for masters.com. Now let's begin with our next 5-star episode on Follow the Brand. Welcome to the Follow the Brand podcast, where we are building a 5-star brand that you can follow. I am your host, Grant McGaugh, bringing you one of the brightest minds in healthcare today, Carladenise Edwards. She was called to healthcare to have an impact. Challenges are exponentially greater today for the industry, and a decision must be made on investing in our future today. Knowledge is power, and we must learn from each other and understand the confluence of politics and economics to create a better healthcare experience for all, bring value every day, and build relationships with people willing to make the investments for our community. Carladenise says her success lies in simplicity of being present, don't quit, and strategically plan to solve problems. Dr. Carladenise Armbrister Edwards is approaching 30 years of professional experience, from serving as an assistant dean at her alma mater, the University of Pennsylvania, to serving as a government official leading strategy for Providence St. Health, a $24 billion healthcare company. She is a seasoned executive who loves taking on new challenges and solving complex problems. At the height of the global COVID-19 pandemic, Carladenise began a new chapter that draws on her training and experience as a medical sociologist, business development guru, and avid student of the healthcare economy. Her desire to serve led her to the role of Executive Vice President and Chief Strategy Officer at Henry Ford Health System in July 2020, where she is responsible for providing executive counsel and leadership for the system's strategic planning efforts and partnership ventures, business development and transformation initiatives, government affairs, as well as Henry Ford Innovations, the health system's multidisciplinary team responsible for product design and commercialization, technology transfer, licensing agreements, and international programs. Before joining Henry Ford System, Carladenise served as EVP of Strategy at Providence St. Health, where she was promoted from Chief Administrative Officer from Population Health to SVP of Contracting to Chief Strategy Officer. Giving back to the community is a top priority of Dr. Edwards, who has started 2 endowed scholarships for African American students, one at the University of Pennsylvania School of Nursing and the other at Johnson C. Smith University. She serves on several nonprofit boards, including Haluna Health, College Success Foundation, American Board of Internal Medicine, RAND Health, eHealth Initiative, and Connect 313. She has a long history of serving as a strategic advisor to startups, technology, and healthcare companies, currently serving as an advisor to Apatix and Parsley Health. As a military brat, Carladenise imagined settling down in one place, but the universe had different plans. She graduated from high school in San Diego, California, then received her BA and MS in education from the University of Pennsylvania, followed by a trip down south to Gator Country, where she received her PhD from the University of Florida. She studied neuroscience at the University of Louvain in Belgium and gerontology at the University of California, Los Angeles, and has worked in Florida, Georgia, California, Washington, and now Michigan. She lives with her husband, Herman Edwards, and 2 teenage children, William, 18, and Zora, 16, who have embraced traveling, learning, and growing in the same vein as their mother. Let's welcome Carladenise Edwards to the Follow the Brand podcast. Hello, my audience, and welcome to the Follow the Brand show. I am your host, Grant McGaugh, and as always, I have a special guest, and I am so happy to have the opportunity to speak to Carladenise Edwards. I've met her down here in Florida several different times. She's such a beautiful woman. And then she went out to Seattle, and I had people out there. We had conversations about that. Then she goes to Detroit. I'm like, oh my God, she's in the Motor City. I know she's driving up and down the healthcare road there, making her changes because she is a pioneer and a professional at a high level at what she does. And I want her to take the time to have this opportunity. We're in our career development series to truly talk about a career as a senior level executive in the healthcare realm, especially during this COVID pandemic. So without further ado, I want to bring Carladenise up. Let's have some words. Let's have a good conversation. So Carladenise, welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
I'm glad you're taking the time. I know you respect time. Time is valuable to you.
Yes,
and we had a conversation around that a little bit, right? And I just want to ask a very basic question right now, just to get things rolling, because you have objectives. You do this for a reason. Tell us about why you're in the healthcare industry.
There are so many reasons why I'm in healthcare. I think we are called to do things. I think we choose to do things. And I think I've done both. I was called to go into a field where I believed I could have some impact, or the universe thought I could have some impact. And I chose to do that because of my own personal and family issues and concerns. You know, everybody has challenges with healthcare. But I will tell you, as a woman, as a mother, as a daughter, as an African-American, challenges with healthcare are exponentially greater. And the data shows that, right? Black women have the worst health outcomes. And so as I experience challenges with healthcare, trying to navigate for myself and my children and my parents and my cousins and my aunts and my uncles, I realize it's broken. It's fundamentally broken. And so I actually feel blessed that I have the opportunity to be in a position where I can maybe make a little dent, maybe make a few changes to make it a little bit easier and less broken for others. But there's still a lot of work to do, Grant. So every day I wake up trying to figure out what I could do today and then again tomorrow that makes it just a little bit better. But I really want to fix it for people like me. Right.
Wow,
and I really
excellent.
want to fix it for everybody.
Well, we know there's challenges in the healthcare world, and COVID has definitely shed a light on that. We know what the gaps are. But I want to focus on yourself because I'm intrigued with your background. You're one of the few people that I've run across that has expertise in finance, in technology, as well as leadership at the healthcare realm, as far as in the C-suite. And you put all that together to become a chief strategy officer. So tell us, what's the key objective of that? And how did you get all those different disciplines all into one little self called Carladenise?
So the first key is to always say yes. I actually said to somebody the other day, I've never really actively looked for a job. But I have found jobs and jobs have found me, and I'm always open to saying yes. And so when I started my career, Grant, I knew I wanted to do something in maybe public policy, probably leaning more towards education because my mother was an educator. But interestingly enough, my father, not his official title, but was a strategy officer. He was an officer in the U.S. Marine. And he was always number 2, right? So the second in command is the person who drives the strategy, right? That was my father, Anthony Armbrister. My uncle, also chief of staff for mayors and governors and in policy, was also that person who was always driving strategy. So two of my major role models were doing strategy, even though that wasn't their title. In our house, we would wake up in the morning and my father would say, "What's the plan? What's the plan? We're going on a road trip. What's the plan?" And he expected us to have a plan, to have a strategy for the day, for the road trip, for whatever we were doing. So it was kind of ingrained in me. And so I think I've taken what was natural to me and turned it into my career. And I like to go into organizations, help others figure out what's the plan. You tell me, Grant, what your end zone is. Where do you want to go? Where do you want to end up? I'm going to help you figure out how to get there. That's what I do. And so the technology piece is quite interesting because it was really this opportunity that I had where I just didn't say no. Didn't have a clue of what I was doing, but I didn't say no. And it was back when I was in Florida working for the Agency for Healthcare Administration. And the governor asked me if I would help lead the governor's task force. This was Governor Bush at the time, on information exchange, right? Technology. At the time, we were really emerging into electronic medical records. But the point of this task force was to figure out how to reduce state spending by expanding our use of technology, right, in social services, particularly healthcare. So I don't know if you remember this, but I was executive director of Governor Bush's task force. It has some funky name. Governor's Health Information Infrastructure Advisory Board. Right? I didn't know that much about technology, but I knew that there had to be a connection between all of the technology, right, that was emerging at that time. What year was that? About 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, and what we're doing now, right? I knew there was a connection between that and making things easier, more efficient, and better.
Man, that is, and you're right, because that was the emergence of technology on a worldwide scale, in that early 2000s. You had the internet boom. They started to see where this data fit. Then obviously you had the Affordable Care Act that occurred. Exactly. And then now you had to use technology in a healthcare setting, right? You were forced, you got to get out of this paper world and get into this electronic world. Let's go ahead and use our understanding of data, on a platform in which we can understand what's really happening in the field, right? Exactly. And maybe that's what scared a lot of people. They started to see like, oh my God, here's the reality.
But I mean, to answer your question, I think we land where we're supposed to be. And it's a combination of knitting together our passions and our desires with our experiences and then our God-given talent, right? So I'm talented at strategy, at devising plans and executing and moving things forward. I'm passionate about healthcare, and I learned as much as I could as possible around technology and then had to weave all that together.
Well, I tell you, you answered the question that we have on the website, at the 5-Star BDM, and you went through that whole exercise, and I appreciate that. And you had mentioned one of your superpowers as that you summarize and synthesize complex issues into tangible and actionable buckets. That tells me a lot, that you can look at a hodgepodge of interconnected, intertwining different aspects and see clarity and give that clarity to your decision support people that need that information. Man, I mean, talk about a talent. That's a God-given talent.
It's so interesting because when I wrote that down, I don't think I'd ever written it down before or articulated it. However, oftentimes you might want to be talented at something, but you're talented at something else. And so people will tell you what you're good at. You just actually have to listen.
That's true.
And that's what people will say to me. They're like, oh my goodness, Carladenise. Oh my goodness, Dr. Edwards, you helped me understand. Or the way you broke that down or the way you put that together really helped us drive something forward, right? And so after you keep hearing that over and over again, I mean, I want to be an expert, right? Actually in something else, but I'm actually an expert at that. And so I realized, well, if that's what I'm good at, then that's what I need to do, right? I need to position myself to be able to do that for people, right? And so that's what I get called for. When folks have a complex issue that needs to be distilled into parts or buckets that then you can actually move forward, right, to accomplish the goal.
Well, I'm sure people are blessed to have you in their circle without question. And in my circle, I asked some of our young careerists, I said, hey, you know what? I'm going to interview Carladenise. We're going to have a conversation. If you wanted to ask a question, what would you want to ask? And this is what came back. And they wanted to know, how did you invest in yourself as you progressed through your career?
I don't know if I would recommend this because it's very expensive, but I am a nerd, a student, an academician. I went to University of Pennsylvania and my parents had to mortgage their house to pay for it. Got my bachelor's degree. I was able to get a scholarship to finish my master's degree. Didn't actually want to leave school. So I stayed and served as a dean at the University of Pennsylvania, trying to pursue my PhD when I decided to move to Florida and pursue my PhD at the University of Florida, where I was fully funded and stopped trying to spend all my parents' money. So I've invested in my education. And even just recently, I enrolled in Harvard University's Adaptive Leadership Institute to try to further my understanding of healthcare economics and the various factors that will influence the way in which we can transform this healthcare economy. So I've invested in my education. I'm an avid reader. I read probably 3 or 4 books a month. When I was flying or traveling, I could probably say I read 1 or 2 books a week. But now with COVID, I don't get as much free time on the airplane to read. So I've invested in my education, and I think knowledge is king. And I think knowledge is king, particularly if you take the time to learn from people who are different from you, to listen to people who are different from you, to absorb perspectives that are foreign from your own experience and understanding. I've invested in the time to do that by traveling, by taking risk in moving across the country, and by studying.
Well, I ask you this because you've written, obviously you're very well read, let's put it like that. And I already know the next question. I can hear it in my ears from one of my other associates that I work with. She wants to know, who is your role model? I mean, who do you look up to? Who do you aspire to be like?
Well, you know who's on top of mind right now? I hope I can say this without tears, is Sidney Poitier, who's a family member, a relative. He was, my father used to always remind us he was our cousin. I'm like, but how, Dad? Could you give us detail? I just know that my grandfather and Sidney Poitier were cousins. And I'm thinking a lot about him and a lot of the wisdom that I garnered from him and my grandfather and my father. That's a tough question because I'm so blessed with so many people who have influenced me. But I think I will generically say my ancestors. I'm inspired by the tenacity and the resilience and the determination of Black people. And my son, we're very intentional about saying Black people after visiting Ghana and Accra, where every time we would walk down the street, the Africans, the Ghanaians would say, Black Americans, Black people. But we have accomplished so much despite what we've been through. And so when I think about what my ancestors went through for me to be where I am, I wake up inspired because failure is not an option. When my great-grandfather was run out of the country by the Klan, he could have stayed on principle, fought, and died, and we would no longer exist, this Armbrister Albury Higgs family. but he didn't. He was smart. He was strategic. He was resilient. He went to the Bahamas. He regrouped, came up with a plan that resulted in generations of people behind him who are making a difference in the world. And so my ancestors inspire me. They inspire me every day because if they could pick cotton, if they could come across the Middle Passage, if they could be beaten and hung from trees and still survive, the little quibbles I have in the boardroom and the fights I have with my colleagues and the problems I might have with my neighbor are so inconsequential.
Well said. Well said. The path forward that is in front of all of us. We must remember where we have come from. And I'm glad you mentioned that because I think we're going through an evolution, a change. I'm seeing a lot of the healthcare systems that have been currently led by African Americans, like in your health system, but we have a lot of them that are retiring, that they are, they fought their fight.
Yes.
And they were like, you know what, I've taken it as far as I can, and now it's up to us. And I would like you to speak to our audience about that. Who do you, this next generation has to come forward. That we've got to prepare, these executives that are in position, whether they're in a VP role or they could be in a managerial role right now, to understand. So if you had to talk to them, knowing your understanding of healthcare systems and the deep understanding you have about healthcare economics, what would you say to them to help them prepare to take on a role to run a healthcare system? This episode is brought to you by 5-Star BDM. 5-Star BDM is a professional consulting and advisory group keenly focused on business development services for small to mid-sized businesses and entrepreneurs. Although every business is unique, they often share challenges that can be addressed through smart branding. Services include process improvement in operations, digital strategy and transformation, business intelligence, digital marketing, and personal branding. Our 5-Star business and personal branding company has helped a number of professionals and organizations to optimize and grow. The result is more business, more opportunities, better reach, positive outcomes. Please visit www.5starbdm.com to learn more and view all the episodes of Follow the Brand.
I have a lot to say on that, but the one thing that's really top of mind is really do understand finance and economics. I think so many of us fail to understand the way in which healthcare is currently financed and how organizations run. I think it's important to understand that because you're going to be accountable for making sure you can sustain the organization in the current state and be prepared for any future changes that come down the pike, particularly in this very tumultuous political environment. So I think those who are astutely aware of the confluence of politics and economics on how we sustain and build healthcare systems are really going to be the ones who differentiate themselves as they're going through a process, right, of being recognized and interviewed and bringing value. The second thing is bring value. Whatever job you have right now, do that job exceptionally well. I see so many people worried about the next job and the next title and the next promotion. They forgot they have a job right now. People are watching. People are watching. Remember I said I've never really looked for a job because I was doing the job I had when somebody called and said, hey, could you do this instead? Or could you do this for me? Because they were watching, right? I love to finish a job. The hardest thing for me to do is leave a job that I feel is unfinished, right? I love to finish jobs and then move on. So do the job you're doing now, do it exceptionally well because people are watching. So one is understand the economics. So you want to be healthcare and you want to be a leader, you have to understand economics. Two, bring value. Do the job you have now and bring value. And then I think number three is make yourself known. Networking. You have to know the right people, be connected to the right people. It is very unfortunate, but most people progress because they were chosen. And for African Americans, we're not chosen. We don't have the connections, the network, the people in our Rolodex. So you need to network and connect. And it's typically with people who don't look like you.
So that leads me to the next question I got from my student audience. And they because they're very interested in branding, right? This is a branding show, and with a focus on career development. So they're saying, well, how do I make myself more visible? What did you do to become more visible? Was it just your work ethic? People seeing the work you did? Did you have advocates? Give us an idea what, as you look back at how you were able to traverse your career and move forward, what recommendations would you give?
I mean, early on, I was an avid writer. So I did pursue my PhD and had the opportunity to publish and present, at conferences and meetings, which led to, the ability to connect with people. And so your writing kind of lives on its own and proliferates, right, beyond you. I think that's one of the ways of getting recognition is being an active writer. And it's so much easier now with the internet, right? But I do think you have to be really cognizant of what you write and what you publish and where you publish it. I think then later on in my career, going back to the networking, I have to admit, I was blessed with a family that was pretty well connected in various cities, right? Like in Miami, in Philadelphia. And so I would ride the coattails of my family. If my dad was going somewhere that was of influence, I was right along with him. If my uncle got invited to the White House, I was like begging to go with him. So, I tried to make sure I was in the right place at the right time, just so that I could see where and how people operated. I will tell you, going to University of Pennsylvania was a big stretch for my family. But part of the argument that I made was, I'm going to be around people who are connected. And so I want to be able to make those relationships early in my career, right? So that I can carry them forward later. And right now, as an alum of Florida, as a Gator and as a Quaker from Penn, I could pick up the phone and call somebody really easily, right? I think folks underestimate the relationships they make in their alumni network, in their schools, and use those.
I totally agree. I've heard that time and time again, that these lifelong relationships that you make, whether it's in a school or in your work setting, or maybe you're working in a nonprofit in your community, that you cement those relationships and people will remember you because of your character and what you brought to the table.
One more thing to add to that, Grant. I learned this when I was working at Alameda Health System. Our chief nurse, her name was Kinsey. She was awesome. She still is awesome. I don't know where Miss Kinsey is today. Taught me about thank you notes. Uh-huh. She would do, I don't remember what the number was, but just say one a day, right? So I took up the habit of every Friday blocking on my calendar standard work to write thank you notes. And I still do that to this day, where I write thank you notes. I write them to perhaps maybe the housekeeper or the person who was servicing my office. I write them to my staff, or I'll ask my staff, is there somebody on your team who deserves a thank you, right? I write them to the mailman if he brought the packages all the way up to the front door. So I think thank you notes are also really, really important. Take the time. And Sidney Poitier once said, and that was repeated on an interview I saw in the news the other night, it was classic in our family, always say please and always say thank you.
Oh, man, that's lovely. I like that. That is taking the time to validate another person, let them know that you appreciate them, no matter what their station is in life. I think it goes a long, long way, especially in these challenging times that we're in. Yes. Now, I've got one question for myself, because I'm in information technology and I work a lot in the healthcare realm, a lot of these different hospitals, and I'm seeing them looking to digitally transform, to change the patient experience, utilizing technologies. Can you just describe for me? Because I know there's problems around, finance. There's probably, problems around culture. How do we get to this digitally transformed hospital experience?
I love that question. I absolutely love it. We have to be willing to let go and figure out what we're going to stop doing. Many organizations can't afford to do both. Can't afford to do all the bricks and mortar and do all the digital, right? We're all up against some incredible workforce challenges. And I think we're going to be forced to think about more efficiencies and how we automate things. It's interesting, when it all first started, everybody was worried about being replaced by computers, right? And we were worried about the impact it would have on the workforce. Now we don't have the workforce, and we need to hurry up and figure out how to automate things that should have been automated years ago, right? And so I do think we have a little bit of a impetus to do more automation and use more technology and digital because of the workforce issues. But I think organizations are going to have to figure out what they're going to stop doing so they can do this instead. I also think patients and consumers really need to demand, right, the access and the efficiency, and talk and walk and march with their feet and their dollar. And in healthcare, it's very conflated because, remember, the purchaser and the payer is not often the patient, right? And so the federal government has been putting pressure on us. But right now, if you look at the way the industry is moving, purchasers, which are large group employers, are putting pressure on us too, right? They're trying to figure out their own solutions, like the Walmarts and the Amazons of the world, or they're saying to us, you know what, we're not going to use your services because you're not getting our people back to work fast enough. They're not healthy enough. Think about all the online and at-home services that have proliferated during COVID. Who would have thought you could take a lab test in your own bathroom, a COVID test in your bathroom? Who would have thought?
I didn't see it coming, but we see it now. So things have changed.
And so now we're going to have to figure out how to respond to that being a standard, not just for COVID, but for other conditions as well, right? But then we have to capture that data in a way that we can protect the public's health and create the continuum of care for the patient. Because it does you no good to do a lab test at home, but you don't have the follow-up care and the treatment, right, to service you now that you found out that you have a condition. So we got to get these phones, this digital, the technology caught up with the capacity to do more self-directed care so that everything is interconnected. It's going to require decision-making at leadership level, investments by hospitals and health systems in digital, which means they might have to divest, stop investing in some other things.
I totally agree with that. Thank you for that information, because it resonates with me, because we're in this world now that we are disconnected socially or physically, but then connected electronically, digitally.
Yes.
And there's a big shift. There's remote patient monitoring that's happening now. There's patient experience that people are expecting, this kind of interaction like you get in the hospitality world or the retail world. There's this new thing that people are starting to buzz about called the metaverse. What is that? How does that work? So there's a deep immersion into digital technology that is occurring in our society. It's happening at our younger generations. They're used to it. They grew up with smartphones, and they're already utilizing this, living in this world we call that metaverse. If you got your kids working in gaming,
Grant, everybody is racing to get back to the way things were before COVID. But if you think about it, there were a lot of things that were broken before COVID. And a really good case in point, you could either use office space or schools, right? And so my daughter was sick this past week. Part of it was quarantine, and the other part was she wasn't feeling well. The part where it was quarantine, she could not get her lessons from school because they don't have a hybrid situation of it's either or. They're all online or they're all in the classroom. But think about if we could figure out that middle ground. And how many more kids would benefit if we could figure out the middle ground where if you have some reason you can't make it to school, you could still get your lessons online and not skip a beat. That should not be problematic, right? So everybody wants to go back to the way it was, which is we're always in person. We're always in our physical office, or we're always sitting in the classroom, this either or. And I guess what I'm saying is we've been challenged to think differently. So let's think better. What's the better solution, right? That we can carry on into the future. That's where you have to start saying, okay, what are we going to stop doing, right? And that's where we get stuck, is with the, we're not going to do that anymore. We get really stuck there as leaders sometimes.
And that's it. That's it. The status quo, right? This is the way we've always done it. And it's scary. It's risky to do something different. I know what's going to happen. There's the known and the unknown. But however, the known is challenged because you cannot continue to move forward. I know there's a saying, I hear a lot of college students being told this, like, you got to get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yes. Right? Frederick Douglass.
There you go. There you go. So that's been living with us for a long time. Change is a constant. We're going to come to the end of our discussion. I really do appreciate that. And before we end, I'd like you to take this opportunity. We've been asking you a lot of questions. We've been talking to you. Putting you on the spot. I want you to put my audience on the spot. I want you to challenge them. I want you to talk to them. A lot of my audience are healthcare executives or aspiring healthcare executives, a lot of information technology people, entrepreneurs. And I'd like for you to speak to them from where you are, your experience, and give us some words.
Oh, my goodness. You put me on the spot. I'm really curious about what people are excited about and what each human being thinks they can contribute to making the world a better place. And so when you wake up each day, I would just share, what did you do yesterday? What are you going to do today? And what can you do better tomorrow? I read somewhere recently, I don't know whose quote it was, but they said, I'm not in competition with the world. I'm only in competition with myself. So what do you have to do with yourself so that what you're able to contribute, right, makes the world around you, the surroundings around you that much better, right? Because you've invested in yourself to make everything around you that much better. So I don't know, that's a really tough thing, a tough question. I don't know what the takeaway is. I don't actually think I'm that interesting or important. And so I'm like, I don't know why you're asking me that. I lean on other people for wisdom.
I tell you, I beg to differ. I think you are an example of the success that a lot of people are aspiring to. And I talked to a lot of different healthcare executives that they're in, either they're finishing up their school, their education, their PhDs, they're getting into industry, they're finding out things that are a little bit different from what they learned. They're in management world, but then they're having trouble getting to that director position. And if they get to the director, how do they make that leap to VP? And then how do they get into that C-suite? They see, like, wow, it looks, they see your trajectory. And they're like, well, I think I could do that. That's a 10-year, roadmap or 5-year roadmap.
Grant, I am going to rudely interrupt you.
Yeah, go ahead.
I never aspired to be where I am.
Nice.
I didn't even know the thing existed. When I went to high school, I did not grow up and say, I'm going to be the chief strategy officer, executive vice president, health system. Didn't know there was such a thing. I'm convinced my children today will have jobs and careers that they don't even know today exist because it'll be 20 years from now. So what I would say to your audience on that is be present. You could be impactful today in the job you have right now. You can and you should, and you're obliged to be, right? Whether it's being kind to somebody, helping someone, fixing a complex problem in your department that you're currently running, managing, or working in. Today, you can be impactful. The title is so inconsequential. It's what you do today and what you do tomorrow that's going to make a difference in the world. It's not what you're going to do 10 years from now when you have the title. So I will also say this, once you get that title, I'm going to tell you, you're going to be like, ooh, be careful what you ask for. I wasn't sure I was signing up for this. So when you get there, don't quit. Because that's what I find happens more often than not. People aspire. They knock people out in the hallway. They're ripping and running to get to the next level. And they get there like, ooh, this is not all I thought it was cracked up to be. Well, what I'm going to say is when you get there, don't quit. Do the same thing you're doing below, which is be kind, be impactful, bring value, solve problems. And just keep moving forward. So yeah, I just want everybody to know, I didn't wake up and say, oh, I want to be this. And I knocked people out in the hallway to get there. That's not how it happened. I was minding my business. And I don't actually think I'm successful because my actual goal or desire is to write this manifesto on how we fix the broken healthcare economy. And I haven't written it yet. So when that is written down on a piece of paper or typed into my computer and sent to somebody who cares, then I will feel like I've been successful. In the meanwhile, I'm just taking up space. I am taking up space.
Well, I tell you, to be continued. We will definitely get to that point where we see an authored book by you. I'm sure you have a lot of experiences and things that you can put down on paper that'll be an inspiration to all of us and a roadmap for success. And I love the fact that now you've told us exactly deep within yourself what my honest need to do right now. And that is to be impactful in the job that you have at this point. I love that. That is wonderful. So just one last thing. If someone would like to get in contact with you, what's the best way?
I am like addicted to LinkedIn because I love to see people who I've had relationships with flourishing and soaring. So you can try that. It's not the best way, but I'm probably my email or, and do you have my contact information?
Yeah, no, that's fine. LinkedIn is fine. They can look out for that, or they can contact me as well. This has been wonderful. Thank you very much. I want to let my audience know that we can see all the episodes, including this one, at the 5-Star BDM website. That's www.5starbdm. That's B for brand, D for development, M for masters.com. So thank you very much, Carladenise.
Thank you, Grant. Thank you. You are so kind.
Keep enjoying. I really appreciate you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.